Hello there, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Fired Up. My name is Morgan McClintic. I'm joined again by the whole gang. So that's Nicole Pytel.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Morgan.
Ian Lepner.
Hello, hello.
And Chris Albrick.
Hello, everyone.
So today is our predictions episode because it's 2025. So happy new year to you all. And we're actually recording this a little bit before because we're getting some much needed downtime. But by the time you hear it, it'll be a fresh new year. So starting off, happy new year. And what better time than to do our predictions episode? It was a great show last year. And so what we plan to do is take a little look through our predictions that we made for 2024 and score ourselves. And then we will make our bets for next year, or rather this year by the time you hear it. I'm not good at time shifting, it seems. Top of the show, we predicted that Twitter or X would continue its decline, probably a fairly safe bet, but maybe not. Musk has pulled out some impressive feats in the past, and that CEO Linda Yaccarino would be out by the end of Q1 2024. Clearly, she did not leave. But at the time, in fairness, this was around the time that Musk had been telling all the advertisers where they could poke it, and it was not looking good. So I felt that was a good prediction, but no, going down with the ship.
I think this is such a complicated prediction to score because in so many ways, the prediction that Twitter would continue to decline is right on. Its advertiser numbers are atrocious. It's losing money. I think its business is down something like 80% from where it was when Musk bought it. As a business, it's in terrible shape. Now, if you're rating its cultural clout, that's a lot harder to judge. Because now with Musk assuming the position that he has in the incoming White House, and we just saw yesterday the effect that Elon's tweets could have on the Republicans, the House voting on the continuing resolution. The conventional wisdom, at least as of today, is that Elon single-handedly squelched that bipartisan deal by tweeting. It's really hard to untangle. Again, the conventional wisdom is that regardless of how Twitter's doing in business terms, Elon has bought himself the biggest megaphone in the world. I think that's overstated. I was just looking at statistics on usership of Twitter. According to most metrics I've seen in terms of daily visitors in the United States, it's still down in the 8th or 9th place behind even Reddit or Instagram. And the wisdom here is that Elon has bought himself a platform to exert power over policy. And he may very well have done that because there's yet another dimension to consider. Even if you set aside the sheer numbers of people who use X, people who disseminate information are still predominantly on X. So cultural influencers, the coterie around Elon, the media are still predominantly using X. I suspect a lot of what happens on X gets disseminated on other platforms. So in effect, even if people are not getting their information directly from X, what happens on X does get disseminated through the press, through other social media channels. And it makes it really difficult to come up with one answer as to how Twitter is doing. In one sense, terrible. In another, it's the most influential platform in the world.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, if you look at it from a point of view, did the investment work out, right? And look across the portfolio now of everything that Elon touches. It's worked out tremendously, I would argue. The investment that he made has literally added rocket fuel to his fortune. There's that. And it makes me think about how news has always been a loss leader. The old ABC News and CBS newsrooms were not making money for their organizations, but they were sort of foundational for viewership and for credibility. And if you kind of take a step back and you say, okay, well, Elon understood what Trump wants to do is put on an amazing reality show about government and his time at the helm. And he has the ability to really add a lot of character to that and join in and even add a broadcasting mechanism for that and a means for easy lobbying. And it's a little bit too much power for my liking. I'll put it that way.
So how are we going to rate us? We're going to say, okay, got this half right on this. Certainly didn't get the fact that Linda would be so
From a marketer's point of view, I would give it a green check.
Yeah, very few of our clients are asking about Twitter from a paid media perspective compared to a couple of years ago. We're really running no programs on that, although you could argue that there are certain groups that there's still a great way to reach them. All right, next one. Programmatic advertising will get harder as privacy measures kick in. And what this really meant was, look, Google was finally going to ban cookies, and that was going to make programmatic advertising a lot harder. But in the end, they didn't. And programmatic advertising is still just fine. And a lot of programmatic ads don't really use cookies anyway. So I think this one, look, we didn't get it right. I don't think we need to debate it. We didn't get it right because the thing that was predicated on got punted. But I do still think that efforts towards privacy are increasing. Whether they're working or not is a topic for another show. Here's another one. Content will get more visual and interactive. Nicole, how do you think we did on this?
I think we did pretty good. Everybody's talking about visual and interactive content, although I don't know how much I've actually seen in terms of an increase. As far as the things that I get in my inbox every day or the companies that I follow, we have this conversation that, oh, people are sick of the old ways of communicating. They don't just want a static PDF or a static email. But I'm not sure anybody's totally flipped to that whole visual interactive side, which is a little bit surprising. And I think in the startup world, it can sound a little frightening because it is a bit of uncharted territory. There are tools that you've got to invest in to do things like that, or at least the time to pay somebody to do something like that is going to be more than a static PDF. So I think if there was one really good example out there, or just a startup that was really willing to do something different, I think we'd see a lot more of this. I think it needs to be like that one that comes through the door and really makes a splash before, especially our listeners, are going to dive right into it. I wish they would. I would love to do more quizzes and assessments and things like that, because I do think that's the future of lead generation. I really do. I think you got the prediction right because it's top of mind for everybody, but I'm not sure how many have actually pulled the trigger on it.
Yeah, and I wonder how much this has to do with just the cost of production and the platforms available for production. Looking at it from the media relations side of things, at least at the better funded publications, you do see media presentation articles. The packages that say the New York Times turns out are increasingly visually sophisticated with mixtures of moving imagery and text fading in and out as you scroll down. And what would have been years ago described as a multimedia presentation is becoming the norm. It used to be like there was some, I can't remember. I feel like it had to do with avalanches or something snow related, but there was some famous package that the New York Times did years ago. And now it feels like there's something like that coming out every week. Now that granted, this New York Times is incredibly well funded, but they've made the investment clearly to produce packages like that on an ongoing basis. One area where maybe not where you're seeing radical change year over year, but certainly within the last few years, I think websites, just conventional B2B websites have become, if not more interactive, they've become more visual, or at least they're more visually sophisticated. And I think that probably has to do with the availability of tools on common web platforms. And I don't really keep up, honestly, with developments in CRMs and web dev platforms. But I know that people are not coding these horizontal scrolls from scratch. And those are clearly plug-in tools. So it may be, the demand seems to be there, but it seems that the economics of production don't yet bear it out. It'll be interesting to see whether visual AI like Sora affects production in a meaningful way, and we start to see more visual presentations because of it.
The way that things tend to go here is somebody establishes a new ceiling and that raises the floor more quickly than it raises sort of everyone's ceiling. And so I agree on the website side in particular. Now we have this expectation that as we scroll down, things are going to be more interesting than just plain text in a couple of different formats, right? We're going to see some movement and so on and so forth. Now, I'm sure that if we had designers on here, they'd be like, oh my gosh, that's so old. But the floor is in versus what used to be some pretty terrible websites, not just for the experience, but also for the way they convert. We're starting to see that floor harden. And I think Chris is exactly right. He took a lot of my talking points about the tools and how fast those came and those come to market. I think right now it's clear you can't just try to upload your video and churn out what the new AI tools automatically output, right? They're not quite ready for prime time unless you're buying the most premium versions and so on and so forth. But if I were to make a prediction coming off of that, I think this is the year that we're going to see that start to change a lot more from the point of view of, we talked about this, I think, on a different pod about the ability to automate those kinds of one-person videos that might create a reaction toward making more of them, since you don't have to pay a specific influencer or actor to create a first-person type of endorsement video, that kind of thing. I think we're going to start to see that floor raise again when it comes to interactive stuff.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And in fact, Marketing Scoop has a stat here saying 96% of marketers plan to increase their investment in interactive content over the next 12 months. So I think we were right. And if you scroll down LinkedIn, the number of videos you see there is far more than it was last year because people are feeding that in. It's getting more engagement. All right. So I think green check. Next one was B2B brands are going to target younger audiences on TikTok. Did they, Nicole?
I don't think they have in the droves maybe that we thought. And maybe considering what's going on with TikTok right now, that's a good thing.
So I've been eating all these flaming hot things for cloud control and nobody's watching. It's just three views of me just eating spicy things for web infrastructure tools.
You're just ahead of the game, though, Ian. Everyone will catch up. Yeah, I would have liked to have seen this a little bit more. I mean, digging around to kind of substantiate this, there's a stat here from Uplead saying that B2B standouts like Hootsuite, Shopify, and Adobe were heavy on TikTok and YouTube to build brand. But I got to say, you know, across the clients we're working with in startups, TikTok didn't really come up heavily on the list in the way that I'd hoped. Okay, so maybe a fail on that. All right. So what are we saying? Yes on Twitter, no on programmatic advertising, yes on interactive content, no on TikTok. 50%. Harsh.
Yeah, we need to make safer bets this year, Morgan.
I know. So let's talk about this year. So my first one, the sky is going to be blue in 2025, and I'm pretty confident about that. Just padding my numbers. I'll go through a few of mine, and then if you've got some, let's sort of chime in at the end here, and you can tell me whether you agree. First one here, I think startup marketer staff churn is going to increase in 2025. And the reason is, you know, we've had a year of efficiency. We've been trying to do more with less. There's a lot of burnout. I'm actually worried about people taking on too much, too many programs, too much stuff laddering up into marketing, fewer people to deliver it. Everyone's sort of collapsing into the break, but systemically, we're asking too much from the people, and that was going to lead to churn in 2025. And already remember, CMO's average tenure at a large company is 24 months. I would imagine in startups, it could be less. It's going to be hard to measure, but I think 2025, brace yourself.
Yeah, I think it's coming one way or another, right? If you're a company that is not successful, funders are going to turn the page, and that will be the reason. But I think we're going to see more voluntary churn, and I think that's what you're sort of getting at, because there's going to be more options as interest rates go up. There's more possibilities, and also it becomes more possible each day to create your own agency or to create your own group of extra skills or extra things that you're bringing along when you get to your next opportunity. I think that those who understand how to use AI and those who understand, especially as we get into things like agentic AI and things like that, will get more and more tools at their fingertips to go ahead and make the leap, or at least until they find that right opportunity that is a full-time one. You could argue that those same tools might make it so fewer marketers are needed. So that's quite possible. But I do think that overall, I follow the idea that if we can do more with tools, we'll do more overall, not just winnow down the people tasks.
You've made two really good points, Ian. One is the whole going out on your own thing. We've had a couple of podcasts about fractional roles and what that entails. That is very much a thing that I think we'll probably see more of. And also to your earlier point, Ian, about raising the floor. And I think we're seeing founders and VCs that are like, why aren't we doing this and this? You have one person or you have two people. They can't physically do all of that. So I think those demands are going to come in. And we're going to see more voluntary staff churn because it's just going to be more than people can do. No matter how they're leveraging tools, I think the demands are going to get bigger and bigger. And if budgets start to go up, they're going to say, we're giving you more money. Yeah, but you're not giving me more hands on deck is the problem there. So I totally agree with this one, Morgan.
I think this is a brilliant prediction because I think this time next year, you would be able to make the case either way. Because on the one hand, as I think Ian was saying earlier, after a downturn, and I think it's fair to say we've seen a localized downturn in the tech industry, right? After a downturn, you do tend to see a lot of voluntary churn because people have been holding on until opportunities open up, will seek greener pastures, right? I've started to see coverage of that phenomenon already. Surveys showing that people are, unhappy in their jobs, but holding on just because they don't see any other options. On the other hand, we're going to see the pendulum is swing away from employee power toward employer power. That is broadly a trend in the American workforce that seems to be gathering steam under the incoming administration. The culture that is being reinforced from the coterie of people, I use that word again, around Elon and Doge. And you might say, what's the connection between Doge and the tech workforce, right? Aside from the fact that the people leading it come from the tech workforce, but the mindset of efficiency that they're promulgating at that level is a reflection of the ideology of some of the more powerful people influencing management in Silicon Valley. And if you look on social platforms where these people follow each other, it is mutually reinforcing. And you can see that there is a sort of hardening consensus that employees have had it too good for too long in tech. And it's time for managers to start enforcing return to office and start cutting back on perks and start demanding more work for longer hours, that kind of thing, getting back to what they remember the tech business was like, whether they remember it rightly or not. There's a feeling that before the pandemic, things were running more efficiently and the balance of power swung toward the employee too much over the pandemic, and we have to swing back. So I think on the one hand, you're going to have people seeking better options and they're going to want to leave jobs they're unhappy in. And on the other hand, I think that you're going to see a tightening of control by employers in tech, especially in big tech, which will tend to restrict the opportunities that those people seeking them might have expected to find in years past.
So our next prediction here is that SEO will be just fine in the face of AI search. Now, why do I think that? Lots of people have predicted the death of SEO. It's kind of tiresome. Various parts of marketing die with frequency. PR is always dying. But it's SEO's turn to die, and I think that's just nonsense. The concept I hear, I think the premise is, look, everyone's going to be searching on ChatGPT and Perplexity, and all of your hard work trying to sort of work for the algorithm is going to fail. But the reality is that most of SEO best practice is around creating educational, neutral content and not about stuffing keywords or technical optimizations, although those things are important. And so what do those AI search engines ingest? They ingest educational, neutral content. So if you have that, you're going to get ingested and your results are going to get turned up in the AI overviews or in ChatGPT summaries, and they're going to get the citations. And we have seen it. This isn't conjecture. We see it. We've seen it with our own content. We see it with clients. And that traffic, when people do click that, is high intent. Those people are looking specifically at your content. We've seen them convert. And so there might be less traffic to your site from these referral sources, but it's going to be higher intent and convert at a higher rate. So my prediction here is that SEO is going to change. Of course it is, but best practice means you're going to succeed in the world of AI search.
I think this is probably the 5th or 6th time that SEO has died since 2010. So there's that. It's got 9 lives apparently. No, it's not going anywhere. And I don't know if we'll see it in 2025 or if we're still all getting used to ChatGPT and Perplexity and tools like that. But I think we will see a new type of expert pop up, more of like an SEO for AI. I think we're going to see that as a real domain where, just like they did with search engines, people learned what Google's algorithm was doing. They learned what it picked up, what it didn't like so much. We're going to figure that out on ChatGPT and Perplexity. It's a matter of time on when we figure that out, but you can bet that there's SEO types figuring that out right now to crop up like a new group of experts. But SEO is not going anywhere. We see that with our own stuff. We see that with our client stuff. Month after month, we see SEO doing quite well. And you know what? Hey, if we can drive some traffic with ChatGPT and Perplexity, I'm all for it.
SEO may have started out as, in some areas, by some people, as some hacky keyword game or something like that. But each iteration was intended to deliver better results for the searcher, right? Maybe drive them toward certain properties, you could argue. But solving the problem of finding the answer to my question is going to be continually based on finding the experts that know, right? Whether a search engine does that for you or some AI tool does, right? And getting back to, okay, what are we trying to get across to the public is more than just doing feature comparisons with other products. It's about shaping what they value most about your offering and what they should value most about your offering over a longer period of time. That includes talking to analysts. When we think about B2B PR, the decision-making process there, it doesn't come from having the right words on the right page alone. It comes from the ideas that we're getting across and the expertise we demonstrate.
Okay, so long live SEO. Speaking of culling chunks of marketing best practice, ABM is going to face a backlash, but I think it's actually going to deliver. We see a lot of startups now adopt ABM. Of course, if you go onto LinkedIn, the gurus are out there claiming that that's dying too. Why are they saying that? The tools are too complicated. ABM is nonsense anyway because it's just best practice in marketing, targeting your ICP. And look, I know as more companies try this, a go-to-market motion, that there will be pilots that fail. That's the whole sort of point of a pilot in many ways. That's going to add credence to the backlash. But I actually think startups are working it out and how they can engage their target audiences and their target accounts better and measures the success of that. And so even though we'll see a lot of noise, I actually think in reality, outside of marketing gurus, we're going to see more actual output from this and more companies will put money behind it.
Agreed. And I don't know why anybody would predict the death of ABM. It seems to fit in with the whole do more with less. You have less money. Pick a list of companies that you want to go after and go after them instead of casting this giant net on LinkedIn or Google search or whatever. It just makes more sense, especially with a startup sized budget. As for the tools, we've have proven practices here at Firebrand that don't require a tool. You don't have to go out and spend a ton of money on a platform. You can do ABM. It may not be quite as sophisticated. You might not get quite as many insights as you would from a tool, but it can absolutely be done. If you have a target account list, let's go for it. I think it's crazy to say that ABM is going anywhere. If anything, I think it's going to get bigger, especially in the startup world.
Contrarians like to just say that for the attention, but the people actually doing the work are quietly getting on with the work and not spending their time kicking over the hornet's nest. Next one. Here's one about podcasting. And of course, podcasting is going to get bigger next year. Everyone's predicting that. But I think the programmatic podcast advertising will increase. Overall, the advertising on podcasting went up this year. It was 1.9 billion in 2023. It went up to 2.28 billion, according to eMarketer, in 2024. It's going to go up to 4 billion in 2025. So the amount of money going up is increasing. And of course, there are more podcasts out there, but it's still a tiny fraction of advertising overall. Advertising in the US was 369 billion. So that means podcast advertising is sort of 0.7%. But most of these ads, if you listen to them, are read by the host. They're sort of handcrafted, which is great because you sit there and the concept is, you're used to the host voice and it adds credibility to the ad. That's really good. Now, that's just not going to scale. If we're going to get to more ads here, they're going to need to be programmatic, i.e. you have a platform that says, I'm targeting these people, and it automatically matches your ad and the bid rate to specific podcasts. And you get a more sort of generic, this podcast is sponsored by da-da-da-da, and you just get a generic ad. That kind of advertising, which at the moment I think is only 9% of all the ads that you listen to. Get ready, because we're going to get more generic ads as this scales. It's just a natural part of the scaling of this important channel.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because on one hand, it's like, okay, I can think of advertisers who would want to reach our audience very cheaply. I don't know what you're charging now, Morgan.
Yeah, it's very exclusive. You see, our listeners are premium listeners and we don't interrupt them. So.
But when I'm drinking a Dr. Pepper Zero, what I think, but if you were able to spread your pennies out and get the right people, that's a very attractive notion. And, I know we've got RFK wanting to remove pharmaceutical ads from television and stuff, but you got to reach a certain number of people by law in order to tell everybody about your side effects and things like that. Like I could see even that starting to creep in. So I apologize if there's any...
But you saw it with blogs, right? Where people were running in the early days of blogging, 2004, 2006, people were running AdSense ads on their blogs. You could have any kind of ads on your blog. And did you make much money? No, but it added some credibility. And just the fact that, it suggests a certain audience scale to have these ads in some way, I think.
I think it's a great long tail strategy because, hey, you got an extra $25. Maybe you'll find somebody high intent in the PR category with a simple, we talked about, and we won't get into it today, but we talked about the mergers and stuff in our industry because we're trying to contend with these larger scale tech companies. It's only logical that the tech companies will continue to find ways to disintermediate those businesses through things like, hey, here, you got $20 in a credit card, you can advertise on Fired Up. I think it is a great prediction. And I actually welcome it because at first it might be the PetSmart type ads that don't seem right, but they'll tune that in. And I'd much rather see folks continue to produce content because they have one more reason.
Good stuff. Get ready to listen to some a bit more random ads in the podcasts you love. But here's the next one. Okay, this is a bit of sky is going to be blue, but the AI slop won't stop. What is AI slop? It's all the generic content that you see out there, the blog posts and the emails that you get in your inbox from people trying to increase the number of sales that you have or what have you. That lowest common denominator content, the cost of producing it is zero, and you're just going to keep on pumping it out. Unfortunately, lazy marketers are going to carry on writing blog posts through ChatGPT and sort of spamming it up there. And it's going to be clogging up the search engines. And for a while, it's going to take some time for that to kind of get resolved. So I think in 2025, it's going to just get worse and it won't get fixed. What do you think, Chris?
I agree. I think that's going to be true in many ways. You could define slop in a bunch of dimensions, and each one of them would be valid. As you say, the cost of production for third parties to make content that is then distributed on platforms like social media or Google, that goes way down. And the cost does, which means that the amount goes up. Just randomly, I was talking with a representative from a newswire service, and he mentioned that he had clients or he had seen people, especially small business people, who were issuing 10 press releases a day on their cheapest newswire. I was saying, well, how does that even make sense? How do you have 10 pieces of news? And he said, well, it's not the different pieces of news. There are announcements that are targeted at slightly different constituencies. And it sounded as though it was part of some SEO strategy. He wasn't even quite sure what the theory was behind it. And we agreed that for SEO purposes, it wouldn't seem to make a lot of sense because Google tries to bury press releases, even if you're just putting out one. It tries to not surface them in search results. But evidently, it can also be a part of a strategy for burying content.
Burying bad news. So you just machine gun out fairly similar announcements to try and bury something. That's an interesting strategy.
It's not a direct analogy, but I think it gets at those use cases are going to be bolstered by AI. Anytime you're trying to produce content where the mere existence of the content is all that matters, AI can make content that exists. You might be able to say nothing more for it, but it exists. We're going to be living in a world in 2025 where more and more content is there, I think, just to exist. And we're already seeing on social media the flood in of cheaply produced animated ads for mobile games and that sort of thing. A flood of lousy, cheaply produced YouTube content. This has been called the inworsification. It's not actually, the word is not worse, but this is a family podcast, but let's say the inworsification of the web. I think we're going to experience that partly because of what people are putting on the web, broadly defined, the web and social media from AI, but also because platforms themselves are highlighting, and Google is a great example of this. Platforms themselves are giving premium placement to content that is simply bad or wrong. I think it's sort of generally understood that the Google experience has deteriorated, right? The search experience. In our business, I'm using Google hundreds of times a day. So I'm well aware of how poor the experience has become. It's become unmistakably worse. And part of the problem is that it's now privileging AI generated answers that are often simply wrong. So I think it engenders a sense of malaise and distrust in the entire platform, which is, it's at some point it's going to inspire a backlash. At some point it's all going to get better, but 2025 will not be that year.
It's like the old content farms of 15 years ago where you had folks just churning out content. AI is that on steroids. When you talk about content just needing to exist, that is it. So yes, we are going to see a lot more AI slop, and that slop is going to start spreading into video with tools like Sora. That's one of my predictions for the year is I think brands are going to start to get called out for having really bad AI video. We've discussed on previous episodes about Sora's limitations and where it gets things wrong. And I think brands are going to try to jump on that bandwagon because it is so cost effective. You can just type in a prompt, or even if you give it a whole storyboard, that's a lot cheaper and easier than hiring a production team. But I think we're going to see brands try to take those shortcuts, and they're going to get attention for all the wrong reasons. They're going to be a prime example of AI slop. So there's my prediction. Hopefully it's not sky is blue.
I agree with that. But you should try things. And
Yes.
I do think sort of experimentation is important, but so is taste. And taste is the thing that is going to differentiate the slop from everything else. Your thing is just on point and it has a point of view, and it's not the sort of generic norm. And marketers with good taste, it's kind of rare, will have a nice brand with great content and people will be able to see it. Do try new things, but yeah, keep the taste factor up there, folks. The next one here is about the AI tool Perplexity. And I think that they are going to lose the search race. They were early in with pretty good tool that would make the citations when you were doing searches. Personally, I liked it at that point, but then it sort of started to feel a bit dirty using it. I don't know how you feel, but I always feel like I'm sort of cheating when I'm using it. Then the CEO has made some sort of public comments lately that just sort of prove that he doesn't understand journalism, the very sort of source of what he's using to fuel his product. And now they're being sued. And I just don't think they're going to be able to compete with ChatGPT and with Google, period, on the public search stuff. And I think he's just sort of is out there getting good publicity by saying, hey, New York Times, during their strike, we can help you. I mean, fine. But I think if it's a fundamental misunderstanding of how journalism works, and their biggest play now will be on indexing corporate data and helping surface your own corporate data. And that's probably where the company will get its biggest valuation from, and that they're going to lose the race.
For those of our listeners who don't know Perplexity, maybe
it's basically a search engine, but a chat-powered, AI-powered search engine. And you can put in your query and it will spider the web and bring back citations, links, a summary and links to individual web pages. And this was the first to do it, and so got ahead of the market. It's a subscription model. But now, subsequently, ChatGPT has added in web search to its product and also citations. So they've sort of lost that bit of edge that they had. It's bad because they're just sort of summarizing what today's news is, and you don't have to go to the New York Times because they're saying, oh, well, I pulled this from the New York Times, but here are the headlines from today. Without the New York Times, you wouldn't have had your product. And so you can't just say facts are free on the internet, and so I have a right to scrape them and amalgamate them and serve them up to my users, because frontline reporters are gathering those facts and checking them and verifying them and being the fuel to your car. And without that, a link is not going to be enough.
I have a lot of sympathy for that point of view. And I will admit, I've not gone deep into Perplexity. I haven't, in terms of using it. I'm aware of it. I might have toyed with it a bit, but for the purposes that I would need Perplexity, I find that ChatGPT's web search and even Windows built-in Copilot, which searches the web and sort of collates what it finds, does pretty much the job I need. Now, what does separate, Perplexity perhaps from those other tools I mentioned is it might be just its orientation toward real-time result, or at least its ability in terms of, I'm not sure how strong ChatGPT is there. In a previous episode, I said that I thought Perplexity's approach, if we set aside the product itself and how problematic its approach to licensing and copyright and all that is, but that the sort of the AI infused approach to search might be the killer app for Gen AI, because it, especially as traditional web search deteriorates, what Perplexity and ChatGPT Web offer is, I think, something that people are already looking for from web search. I don't even know how much your average person searching the web is thinking, I need to find a particular website. That was back in 1998. That was very much a problem. I want to find the Nike website, and I can't even be sure that Nike.com is going to take me there. Even back then, people were using search engines for question answering. The fact that you're finding the answer on a website is a sort of secondary consideration for you. If people can get their answer from a tool, which can then provide a link to the source of where that information came from, maybe, a place where you can go to find more detail, I think that's really powerful. To me, Perplexity in this context is a stand-in for that whole approach to web search, which I think is going to be very powerful. But as you say, it raises some fundamental questions about copyright and about the proper use of sources like journalism. I will note, however, that this is feels very similar to the argument that the industry had, or when Google started indexing not just news sites, but books. I remember when Google Books came out, there was a huge controversy. It's probably worth noting that Google Books back in the day provided much more access to literary work. You were much more likely to be able to read books through, or pages of books through Google Books than you are today. And I suspect we're going to eventually move, once all of the court cases have been litigated and all the content providers have had their say, we're going to come to some kind of arrangement where the original sources are not going to be incredibly easily accessed through a service like Perplexity, but the links to that will be mandated. I would expect that in the short term, we're probably going to see a sort of free-for-all where services like Perplexity are using all the data they can get their hands on, and then that's going to be dialed back through litigation in the coming years.
Okay, so any other predictions from the team? Nicole had one. I'm wondering whether Ian or Chris, you want to throw your lot in with a prediction for 2025.
Yeah, I'm just going to throw in an easy one that agentic AI is going to be the topic of, it's going to be the defining term or like the catchphrase for B2B software in 2025. I feel pretty confident about that.
I think this will be the greatest year in history to make fun of a coworker or boss using video tools. Just warning you in advance, guys.
Okay, I'm a bit nervous about that. But anyway, Ian, Chris, Nicole, thanks for your time today. Enjoyed thinking about what's coming up and what the implications are for startup marketers. We got 50% of them right last year, so discount most of what we've said here accordingly. We'd love to hear your thoughts, but whatever it has in store, good luck for 2025 and Happy New Year.